beginning with you, Brother Boy.
Okay. Thank you, Aubrey. Let me start from misdirection. How's that? Okay.
So that sounds.
Or indirection. Let me say how pleased I am to be here for what, the 10th annual Black Writers Conference. I guess I've been at each and every one of them in one capacity or another. Ordinarily, I'm out there with you, reporting from panel to panel. And over the years, it's been some just fascinating, outstanding, remarkable writers we've gathered here. Let me give you my rap on satire straight out of Wikipedia. No, I won't do that. So it was early in the morning, in the middle of the night, and two dead boys got up to fight. It said one was blind and one couldn't see, so they used a little brother for the referee. Now, back to back, they faced each other, they chose their weapons and shot the brother. A dead policeman heard the noise and got up and shot the two dead boys. A lot of satire, or at least the definitions of satire, is wrapped up in that little bit of doggerel. Indirection, irony, oxymoronic, one of those big old 50-cent words, to make it sound like this is one of those graduate panels here. Even talking about satire, which is something we don't talk about that much. Whenever you are faced with a situation like this, hey, Herb, you're on a panel to talk about satire. Well, I haven't written any satire, although some of my readers may see it as that. I didn't intend it to be that way. And my stuff is usually straight ahead, or fact-oriented. Although I think the last time I was here, Tom and Major, I did a thing in creative nonfiction, which is where you can blur those lines between fact and fiction. I think Alex Haley had a concept, he called it faction, when he was doing that remarkable book that all of you have read, and if you didn't read it, you probably saw that monumental television series based on roots, or ruts, depending on what part of the country you come from. One of the things about satire and doing my research on it, I stumbled on, and Tom and I talked about this here. It's a remarkable piece here on someone, I wish we could have him here. Daryl Dixon Carr. Exactly. What a fascinating interview. I went online and found this, and you can do the same. So if we don't cover this topic sufficiently, I would suggest you check out this particular article. He is just an expert on this, and I learned so much from him. One of the things I learned is that these many years I've been reading satire and didn't know it. One of the things that struck me about Daryl's discussion, I know we have all these men up here. I say, like, where are the women? Don't women, deal with satire? I imagine a lot of them just live it, But I'm sure, Zora Neale Hurston, if you want to go back in time, and Daryl does mention Zora Neale Hurston. What was the time he talked, Moses in the mountain? I think that was the one. But even in Their Eyes Were Watching God, in terms of the relationship there between Janie and T.K., you may find some aspects, Janie Crawford, you may find some aspects of irony there, verbally, as opposed to in a real physical way. But certainly, there must be some women out there who have been dealing with satire. I went back through my library, and I couldn't find one that, I think Nalo Hopkinson in her book, The Salt Roads, comes pretty close. There's some things there. Certainly, I mentioned, I heard Tony K. Bambara's name mentioned in terms of the Salt Eaters. But there's some things, when you're saying, if you're defining satire then as being wit, humor, some forms of sarcasm and cynicism, being ironic, and I think that's probably the key word on time, is like being ironic, how ironic it is. And I can't think of a more ironic writer than Ishmael Reed. If you pick his stuff up, almost all of his books has an aspect, some element, of irony and wit and humor. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, What I'm suggesting to you is that just about all of the writers, and Tom and I talked about this earlier, that most writers out there at one time or another in their career has dabbled or had one of their books or essays or something like that that had elements of satire there. Certainly with Invisible Man, which is satire can go in so many different directions. It can go to the tragic, it can go to the comic, it can go to the sci-fi, it can go to speculative fiction, it could go to fantasy, and you'll find it even beyond the literary genre. I talk about from a television standpoint, like In Living Color, or Saturday Night Live, or Mad Magazine. You know, all these things have dabbled or have some aspects of satire involved there. And if you come down across the years, I mean, if you go back to the Harlem Renaissance, and Aubrey, you mentioned George Schuyler, Black No More. And Black No More, from a theatrical standpoint, and probably Tom will deal with this a lot better, when you talk about Douglas Turner Ward's, you know, Day of Absence, you know, that's where you find it happening within the theater. And many, many times I was thinking about George Wolfe's, you know, The Colored Museum, which is another, like, it's kind of like this farcical thing, you know, that's to make humor and sometimes to ridicule and also to stab and to be very critical and to begin to change things, Aubrey. I think you had a number of these here kind of driving concerns when you talk about satire. I was looking at Erasure by Percival Everett, yes, which is a more recent book that deals with that, particularly as he talks about, you know, the new movie out there, Precious. And in Erasure, there's a very humorous thing in which he lampoons or parodies or does a signifying job on Sapphire's book, Push, and the movie Precious. Again, I recommend that one to you, Percival Everett, very, very fine writer who kind of gives this whole notion of satire, you know, a current disposition, a current expression. So across the years, you know, out of the Renaissance, you had a number of writers there, Aubrey, beyond George Schuyler, Langston Hughes, Jesse Fawcett, Nella Larson. You know, all of these writers, you know, had some elements of satire, particularly when you start talking about passing, which is one of the vibrant themes when you look at the Harlem Renaissance, the literature of the Harlem Renaissance. Passing was a theme that popped up all the time. James Weldon Johnson, in his book, The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, sometimes the title itself, you know, Cecil Brown's book, The Life and Legends of Mr. Jive-Ass Nigger, all of these books, you know, began to have elements, and certainly folklore. You know, when you talk about folklore, and I think Cecil Brown does a wonderful job there, and it's kind of connected, Aubrey, with your opening thing about the whole jackass thing off the plantation. And I'll close with this. Cecil Brown talks about a little small man named Ephraim. And, you know, back in the plantation times, you know, all of the plantation owners would take their most powerful stud black man, and they would put them up against each other, usually at the festivals and fairs, to see who had, you might say, the baddest N-word, you know, on the block. And Ephraim was put up by his master to go up against Goliath. He stood 6'8", weighed about 300 pounds, and when he came out there to meet Ephraim, he grabbed a sledgehammer and threw it about a mile up in the air. And when it landed, it dug a hole about 12 feet deep. He was just showing off, you know, his muscular power and prowess. And Ephraim looked at him and said, boy, I'm in trouble. And nowhere in the world I'm going to beat this fellow. But what he did, he came out, had his cape on, and asked for his gloves and everything. He had a little second attending him. He put his one glove on and kept the other one in his hand. He walked over to the wagon where master and mistress were. He looked at Miss Ann. He took one of the gloves and slapped her upside the head. Whap! Goliath saw that and took off down the road. He said, look here, anybody who slapped Miss Ann out here is a bad, you know what I'm saying. Tom, you got it, baby.